So I have two confessions to make. One is, though this is a TEDx on mindfulness, I have an incredibly unquiet mind. If you're familiar with the concept of the monkey mind, you know, where your thoughts careen about your head as if from tree to tree, I got the Planet of the Apes all up in here. I have a simian dystopia making mischief in my head constantly. So mindfulness does not come easy for me. And I'm in a profession called mediation, which, though it is one letter away from meditation, finds itself very often at odds with this idea of being here now, when we try to help people move forward in their problem solvings without making judgments or decisions. My second confession is that I don't know many words, but I'm a visual thinker, so I'm better with pictures. So I made some drawings to share with you. Hopefully you can see them from the back. If not, this is a good time to take out your opera glasses or squint. Okay, this is F. Scott Fitzgerald, who once said that the sign of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the head and maintain the ability to function. And then I think Hemingway punched him in the mouth. This is very much the core of mediation. So the idea of holding two differing truths at the same time. So when I struggle with mindfulness and mediation, I think of F. Scott Fitzgerald playing with a paradox. Get it? Paradox? You know, we got 12 more minutes, folks. It gets a little worse. So my favorite mantra of mediation, and again, briefly, mediation is when you find yourself in the middle of a dispute trying to help people solve problems, but are not making decisions, are not making judgments, and not making assumptions. The easiest way for me to remain mindful is to think of this. It's not about you. You, female sheep. Okay? Great. When we absolve ourselves from the pressure of having to be the one who comes up with the answers, who comes up with the decisions, who has a meaningful opinion to insert into other people's lives, a tremendous relief comes upon us. All right? So when you find yourself helping people resolve their disputes, the more we take off that pressure of ourselves having to be the problem solver, the better. By the way, I recently had a chance to hear former President Jimmy Carter talk about the Camp David Accords. And someone asked him, well, what is your number one piece of advice in mediating a conflict like this between Sadat and Begin? And he said that, well, he learned everything he could about the participants. He learned their psychology, their family history, their culture, a little bit of their languages. He even learned when they slept, so that while one was sleeping, he could be negotiating with the other one. All right? I'm no Jimmy Carter, and nor do I have the first-rate intelligence that F. Scott Fitzgerald spoke of. So I have kind of a different icon that I turn to in mediation. Does anyone recognize this guy? It's Columbo, yeah, played by Peter Falk, dated reference. He was a TV detective in the 1970s who always got the criminal by really playing dumb. He was a detective in sunny Los Angeles, and for some reason always wore a raincoat and always asked these seemingly innocuous questions. The criminals thought they were off the hook, and then at the very end he would say something like, "Oh, just one more thing," and then he would totally nail them. All right? So he played dumb in order to be manipulative to catch the crooks, but I would posit to you that when you're resolving disputes, dare to be dumb. All right? We don't know what we think we know about parties in conflict. Very briefly, one of the first cases I ever saw in mediation were two women who identified as cousins living in poverty in low-income projects in the South Bronx. And one of them was moving out, and they were having an argument over how to divide up the furniture. Now, the mediator very well could have said, well, I've seen this case 1,000 times before. Let's negotiate who gets the sofa and who gets the chair and the ottoman and so on and so forth. Rather, he asked very open-ended questions about who are you? What's your relationship? Turns out that they were a same-sex couple living in a time and a place where it would be very, very difficult to admit that. And underneath it all, the dispute had nothing to do whatsoever with furniture. It was all about the relationship. So rather than making assumptions about who these folks were, he played Columbo, and it really worked to heal their relationship. Okay, I'm going to tell you a quick story from the Cold War. This is Nikita Khrushchev, Soviet premier during the height of the Cold War when JFK was president here. So he called JFK on the special hotline that went right from the Kremlin to the White House, and he said, "Mr. President, I want a peace." I made him Italian for some reason. I'm not good with accents. So as protocol dictated, this went through a very sophisticated translation system in which a Russian and an American interpreter worked together to make sure that they got the exact meaning right before they transmitted it to Kennedy. And Kennedy listens to this, and he's horrified, even though he's smiling here. He was horrified because in Russian, they use the same word, mir, for peace as they do the world. So this was translated to Kennedy as, "I want the world." Okay? What was lacking here, and what they ultimately did, was use a feedback loop. So very simply, they repeated back through those translators back to Khrushchev, "Did you really mean to say, I want the world, meaning this sphere, this planet, this orb? No, I want peace. You know, the ones with the peace signs and the doves and all that stuff," right? So this technique, as useful as it was in preventing thermonuclear war, is equally useful in our interpersonal relationships. And it's something that we just say, that we call reflection. So reflect. When you hear someone say something angrily or provocatively, the best thing to do is not to react, but to simply repeat it back to them. "Let me make sure I understand what you said. You're really upset because the apartment's a mess." Okay? Many people in conflict not only want a solution or a resolution, they want to be heard. One of the best things you could do is reflect back what people said. I'm a fan of the Velvet Underground. They have a song called "I'll Be Your Mirror." That's the oral thing that pops up into my head when I think of reflection. Be the cow. By the way, I posted this drawing on Twitter, and someone told me it looked like Hitler. He just has a black muzzle. So I want to go on the record and say there's nothing about Hitler that you want to emulate in resolving conflicts. So many people who mediate, one of the challenges they have when trying to resolve disputes is the expression that they use and the nonverbals that they use. And they often seem just like so serious and so intent because they don't want to look like they're siding with one party or another party, and they're so engaged in it. There's a neurological idea that suggests that we don't only smile because we're happy. We're happy because we smile. So in other words, the countenance that you create, the expression on your face, could very much impact the way you mediate and resolve conflicts. I mentioned before, sometimes we have to play dumb. If you invoke this idea, for me, of a cow face, this kind of look of bovine curiosity and vapidity, there's a chance that you're not only going to play dumb, but you really are going to be dumb in a good way that will open you up to a lot more creative ideas with your clients. Anyone know who this is?
Miles Davis.
It's Miles Davis. In Canada, they call him Kilometers Davis. So Miles Davis is reported to have said something to the effect of, it's not just about the notes in the music, it's about the space in between the notes. Right? One of the hardest things that we grapple with in conflict resolution is what do we do when there's absolute silence? We feel this great temptation to jump in and do something or say something. And I come from a family in which half of my family, for them, normal conversation is interrupting each other. They're from Eastern Europe. Other half of my family are Pennsylvania Dutch, which means if there's like a 30-second space between sentences, that's like a rapid-fire banter for those guys, right? So many of us struggle with this idea of silence. What I suggest is let silence in conflict resolution be your friend. So if you're working with parties who are in conflict and you're at an impasse, one of the best ways to stay in the moment is simply do nothing. Someone will fill the space, and it needn't be you. It can often be a great time for people to reflect on what they've been thinking. This is the DeLorean, which is from the movie Back to the Future, in which it serves as a time machine fueled by the flux capacitor. So one of the things that's often at odds with being here now in mediation is that we see, when people are in conflict, a slice of their lives when they're often not at their best. They're highly emotionally aroused, they're angry, they're hurt. I think of myself when I have to call the cable company after my TV goes out in the middle of The Walking Dead, and I call the cable company, I'm put on hold, and I would be horrified to think that if they analyzed my whole life based on that slice, that I would be seen as a very different person than the guy who runs the New York Peace Institute. Okay. So sometimes to be here now, it means be somewhere else at some other time. When we mediate disputes, one of the most effective things that we can do is ask people, tell me more about what things were like before this actual dispute happened. What did it used to be like? So we encourage people to time travel a little bit beyond where they are in that particular moment to see if maybe there was a time and a place where they're able to work things out or communicate in a different way. So time travel. Now, most of the things I've been talking about are things that we do as mediators who find ourselves in the middle of resolving disputes, listening to both sides. However, much of what I said can also be useful if you're not the one who is mediating the conflict. There is the idea that if you have two people who are dancing, it only takes one partner to dance well, that the other will follow and will automatically be a better dancer. I don't know that I believe that because many people have tried to teach me how to dance and it hasn't quite worked with me, but I still like the metaphor. So dance, zombie, dance. I figure if Michael Jackson was able to get all of these reanimated corpses to dance beautifully in the Thriller video, and those guys have no sense of rhythm, then this is possible. So all these things that we're talking about, playing dumb, reflecting, traveling in time a little bit, these are things that we can do as individuals when we find ourselves in the middle of disputes. If I had the dancing skills, I would moonwalk off the stage, although it's kind of hard on this lovely shag carpet. So